Hi, I'm Tom Migot from Tom Migot Photography. Welcome to this series where we learn Photoshop step by step. So far, we started our journey by discovering each tool from the toolbox. Well, today we're going to see another tool, and that is the crop tool. The crop tool can be found just underneath the magic wand tool, which we talked about in a previous episode. And when you click and hold for a second, here you can see the different variants that you have for this tool. You first have the crop tool, the basic one. Then you have the perspective crop tool. Then a slice tool and a slice select tool. So we'll see all of those in this episode today in detail. And you can notice that each variant has a keyboard shortcut and it's always the same. It's the letter C, meaning that if you actually already selected on the marquee tool and you want to access the crop tool, all you need to do is press the C key. And if you want to go through each variant, you just hold the Shift key while pressing the C key. And each time you press the C key, you go through each tool. The crop tool, what is it for? Well, the crop tool is essentially a tool that's going to enable you to redefine the portion in your image that you want to keep. Basically, reframing your image. There are two schools when it comes to framing an image. Some will say, actually, you frame your image with your camera and you will never touch the frame again. And others will say, well, actually, I use Lightroom or Photoshop, and those tools actually enable me to crop and to redefine the frame of my image. So in that case, I just can do it in post-production. Personally, I sit roughly in the middle. You see, I believe that you need to achieve as best result as possible straight out of the camera. So I will do my best to frame exactly the way I want to, and same goes with the exposure. But sometimes I do know that, especially when I do landscape, because the ratio of the picture coming out of my camera, the DSLR, is a 3:2. Sometimes I want to do a landscape that is going to be 16:9 ratio, and although my camera enables me to actually do that, I can just set the camera to record a picture at 16:9. The way it does it is basically it's going to chop the top, chop the bottom, and just take the center part of my image. And note, I could also reframe the camera so it actually works. But I don't necessarily shoot this way. I would actually enable the 16:9 on my camera so I can look at the back of the screen and see how it would look like if I was to frame it in 16:9. But when it comes to actually taking the shot itself, I always shoot it in 3:2. And the reason is like this: I have more leverage. When I'm in post-production, I can just go up or down depending on how I want to frame it. And I'm going to show you exactly that in this video. But before we do this, I want to go through every single options that we have with the crop tool. So how do we actually crop? Well, you notice that once we have the crop tool selected, you end up having 4 anchors at each corner of the image, as well as in the middle of each edge. And basically, when you move your cursor above one of these anchors, you notice that the cursor icon changes. It suddenly becomes a double arrow pointing in opposite direction. And so when you click on one of the anchor and you drag, you notice you're going to drag in the opposite direction. And you can define the crop factor, the ratio you want, whether you want something closer to 16:9 or even worse, or something more square. Once you have made your decision, you can click anywhere in that zone and just reposition your frame. Once you're happy with it, well, you can just click on the Enter key or press the button right here to validate your selection. And if you're not happy with it, you can just escape and it goes back to the original state. One thing that you may notice as well is that if you actually move your cursor beyond the anchor point, the icon, whether it's the corner one or just the side one, you notice that the cursor actually changes. It's still a double arrow cursor, but now it's kind of a curved. And so that implies that you can do rotation. And by default, when you click and you go up and down, you notice that it basically rotates your image, and the center of the rotation is really the center of your image. So let me just go back. So I'm just going to escape to go back. And the reason why it's the center, you notice there is a dot, a spot right here, a pin. And in fact, when you move your cursor to the pin, you notice that the cursor actually changes. Well, you can actually click on that pin and just move it wherever you want to. You can just go here in the corner, for example, and then now if I actually go in this corner and I just rotate, you notice that actually the image is rotating around this new point and not the center of my image. So that's just something that to bear in mind. Another thing that you may be interesting to know is I showed you that when you click and drag, you're actually going in the opposite direction. So only in this case, only two sides of your image is actually being cropped. Well, if you actually press and hold the Alt key on the PC or Option key on the Mac, you notice that as I'm dragging to the center, basically I'm cropping all around the image and not only one or two sides of the image. So sometimes it might be useful if you really want to just crop the outside and keeping a constant ratio. So I'm just going to escape now. That is to do a crop in a manual way, but you will notice that here at the top left corner you have ratio written, and that basically means that you can actually specify a ratio for your crop. So by default here, this ratio of this native picture is 3:2. So if I do 3:2, then and enter, you notice no difference. If I can actually press the arrow keys here, and if I do this, it will basically invert the 2:3, and so that's how now I've got a vertical. You can also use predefined values. You see, if you want to go for a square, you can just press a square and it will make a square. And then you've got different actions like the 16:9, for example, that I was talking about. So another thing as well that you may want to consider is creating your own crop ratio. And if you're happy with, let's imagine instead of 16:9, you want to go for 16:7. And here you go. And you'd like to save this. Well, in that case, you can just go new crop preset and here just save it. And when you save it, it will actually add it to the list. So you see, you have it here. And you can delete any preset that you created. Another crop ratio that you may want to consider, and actually not so much a crop ratio at all, it's here just underneath the ratio. W by H by resolution mainly means wide, width by height by resolution. And when you do this, it's actually quite interesting. Let me do an escape for a second. What's interesting is that here you can see the ruler on the screen. If you don't see the ruler on your screen, what you need to do is just simply go View and Rulers. And here my ruler is actually set in centimeters. And what you can see is my native image by default is roughly about 61 centimeter by 41 centimeter, something like this, or slightly after 40. So, but let's imagine you'd like to resize your image. You could actually do it with your crop tool. Let's imagine I want to just reduce the size by 15%. So let's imagine I just roughly do 30 centimeters on 20 centimeters. And you can put centimeters or inches, whatever you want to. And because you want to print it, let's imagine that you're going to go, I don't want to go with 14, I want to go with 20 centimeters. Here we go. And now let's imagine you'd like to print it, and often you're going to print in pixel per inch. So let's imagine a resolution of 300. Here we go. Now if I press enter and I'm going to validate this, you notice that now my image, look at the size, it's actually 30 by 20. So you see, you can use a crop tool to actually redesign, resize your image. That's just one way of doing it if you don't necessarily want to do a crop. So let's look at the other features that we have. And I'm actually going to go back in time. And to go back in time, I'm going to use the history panel. The history panel, you see it here at the bottom right corner. If you don't see the history panel, what you need to do is just simply go to Window, menu at the top, and just select history, and it will appear. And note, the history panel can be pretty much anywhere on your screen, because in Photoshop, as we saw in a previous episode, you can move every panel wherever you want to. So here I'm just going to click here at the top. So then the other options as well that you may want to you may be interested in is when you click on your image, you notice that we have a grid here, and that represents the rule of third. And we haven't really talked in the past about the rule of third, but it's just a way to help you, some guidance to help you frame your image to make it more powerful. And there are different ways of actually, beside the rule of third, and you have here a button, and if you click on it, you notice that we have different options for, we have a grid, diagonal, triangle, golden ratio, golden spiral. Well, you also notice that you have the option to auto show overlay, or always show overlay, or never show overlay. Personally, I always go with the always show overlay, but if you have the auto show overlay, the way it works is that the overlay will not show until you actually click in one of the anchor, and then it appears. Personally, I like to see it all the time because I will see it only when the crop tool is activated, and well, I'm interested to see it. Another option as well that you have here is to cycle through the overlays. So it's similar to actually it's similar to Lightroom. So if you press the O key, you'll notice that actually it will go through. I need to actually click. Oh, it's not showing because we're still on the auto show. So let's do the always show overlay, and now click O, and you notice we're going through. That's the golden rule, spiral, and that's the rule of third. It's just an interesting thing to know. The other options that you have here, it gives you different functions of just like here the top one, use classic mode. That is if you wanted to use a crop tool in the way it used to work. Personally, I don't use it that much, I don't use it at all, I must say, because I believe that as new versions of Photoshop are released, then I believe the crop tool is being improved, so there's no point for me to actually go back and use the way it used to work. So maybe it's for the old grumpy farts that just want to use the tool the way they've known it for ages. But personally, I don't use that. The next one, show cropped area. Basically what it is that, let's imagine I make a crop right here. And you see, we can see the data that I've actually cropped out, right? And it's not yet validated. But if I actually click here on the link and I just, well, actually untick the show cropped area, what's going to happen is it just hides it. I don't see it. And although it's nice to actually see your resulting image like this, I personally like to know, what my options are and what the potential of the image is. So I like to see the other data here, and it's hidden a little bit. It's grayed out, and that's because we have enable crop shield here ticked. So I like to have it. I think this is basically the opposite of show cropped area, right? It's definitely the opposite. So personally, I don't like this because yes, I can see the other data, but then I don't see much the zone that I want to keep. So that's why I like to enable the crop shield, and it's enabled by default anyway. And you can choose the color that you want for this grayed out. Here by default, I think it's black, so I just leave it this way. And you can change the opacity as well, and by default it's around 75. So then it leaves us with one more options that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's the auto center preview. You see, by default it's text, and what it means by this is that as I'm dragging, you notice that basically I'm going to the opposite side, and look at the zone that remains, meaning this one. It will always be in the center of your screen. No matter what I do, it will always be in the center of the screen, and I personally quite like that. Whereas if you actually go, sorry, not the right one. If I disable this option, what it does, it doesn't move the picture. So here suddenly my image is, or the preview of that crop, it's at the bottom. It's not very easy to actually look at. Obviously, if you press enter, the resulting crop, it will still appear in the center, but that's, to me, that's still not useful. So I'd like to go back here and enable the auto center preview. And then it comes down to the most important option of the crop tool, and that is that checkbox here, delete crop pixels. So here, for example, when I click on the image and I'm going to start the crop, you see here all the data that is grayed out. When I actually press enter, it makes the crop, but then if I pressed again on the image, you notice the information is still here. So if I wanted to actually, I changed my mind and I just want a bigger crop, I can still go. So it's still there, the data is still there, even after validating the crop. Whereas if I actually went, and I'm just going to do escape here, if I had pressed the delete, I would never be able to actually go back. The data would be totally gone. And that's why I would strongly recommend that you actually never tick the delete crop pixels. Keep that checkbox unchecked. Honestly, I don't see the point of having that. Yes, you may save some space, but I rather have a little more, a bigger file and still have all the potential that I started with. So that's all for the options. So now let's go back to the image the way it worked. It was at the beginning and what I want to do with it. The first thing that I'll notice in this image, and that was shot last night actually, here on the outskirts of Edinburgh on the Pentland Hills, and you can see the estuary, the Firth of Forth here. And clearly the water, it doesn't look very straight to me. So we need to do something about it. Well, we've got two options. The first one, we could actually use the rotation like I showed you before, but it would not be that precise. So what I like to use is the straightening tool, and it's just right here. And we're going to zoom in. So let's zoom in over here on the estuary. And the way it works is it exists the same tool in Lightroom. You're basically going to click once. So, sorry, you badly clicked. You click once and you hold and you drag, and you notice I'm making a line here. And basically it's like a ruler. So what you want to do is make sure that you parallel to your horizon. So here I just want to be parallel to the shore. And I think that's very close enough. And I'm just going to release. And now it has corrected it. So now my image is actually aligned with the horizon. So what I want to do now is I told you about cropping it, redefining the frame of my image in a 16:9 ratio. And to do this, I'm just going to go here like we saw, and I'm going to go for 16:9. And clearly here, I'm going to lose some data on the other side. So I'm going to need to actually shrink it a little bit. So let's shrink it. Here we go. And on the top as well, right here. Now I'd like to move it because I don't want just the crop to be this way. I want to actually get a little bit more sky, and I'm going to align the rule of third top horizontal line with my shore on the estuary, and I think this is going to give us a pretty compelling result. So I'm just going to press enter, and this is what we have. And I think it's quite remarkable. I really like the result. So we started with this, and now we have this. So then the next action that I want to show you is using the other variant, the perspective crop tool. So to show you that I'm not going to do it with this image, I'm going to choose another one, this one. And you see, this is a mural that I've actually captured in Barcelona in 2013. And I quite like it. It represents a Joker from the Batman movies. And we have some sentences from the movies. I really like it. The thing is that when I wanted to take a picture of that, I just could not do it right, being totally parallel to this image. While the sidewalk was wide enough, the thing is, there was a tree and you don't see it. It's right on the right side of the image here. And so if I wanted to go and back up and take the whole image, I would have had some branches in the frame. And that's the reason why I went on the side. You may encounter such scenarios as well when you go for a hike or you're visiting a place and then suddenly there's a sign giving you some history details about the location you're in. And the way they normally do those signs, they tend to either be totally vertical or slightly angled so you can read it properly. And when you take a picture, well, the perspective is not that great. Well, here I'm going to show you how to actually correct the perspective. The way the tool works here, we're going to click here in the corner of the mural, and it's going to make a dot. And now I'm just going to move my mouse. I'm not pressing anything. And I'm going to go to the other corner. It's very similar to one of the selection tool that we used previously. And I'm just going to zoom in now. And I want to make sure that I'm really capturing the whole mural. So I'm going to stop right here. And now I'm going to go down. And you notice we kind of have a spider web or grid appearing. And I'm just going to go down at the bottom of the mural. And I think here it's going to be good. I just don't want to cut any letters. So I'm going to be here. And now I'm going to go at the other corner. And I think this will be good. So if I zoom out, Control or Command 0, I'm zooming out, and now we see I definitely selected the whole mural. What's next? Press the Enter key. and see the result. It basically flipped it, corrected the perspective, at the same time cropped the rest of the wall that I was not necessarily interested in. I could have made a bigger selection if I wanted to keep the wall, but I was not interested. So here, what we notice is actually the result is pretty good, but somehow it's a bit squished on the sides. And so to correct this, I'm actually not going to use the crop tool. I'm going to use another tool that we find in the edit menu, and it's called the free transform. But you see here it's actually grayed out. The reason it's grayed out has got nothing to do with the tool that we selected here. The reason why it's grayed out is because look at this layer panel. We haven't talked about the layer panel yet, and I'll do it in detail in future episode. But what you see, we have our image and we have a padlock. It's because the file itself is locked, the picture is locked, so I need to actually click on it to unlock it. Now if I go back to the edit menu, I see the free transform is actually enabled. You notice we have a shortcut, a keyboard shortcut, Command T or Control T on the PC. When you select that, you suddenly have a selection appearing with the 8 anchor point. And what I want to do now is I want to stretch out sideways this image. So I'm going to select this anchor point here, and I'm just going to drag it until I'm satisfied with the face of the Joker. And I think here that's a pretty good proportion for the face, and I'm just going to release. Now I'm going to press enter. When I press enter, you know, it unstretched it, but it seems that we lost part of the information of our image. But what we're going to do now, we're going to go back to the crop tool. So let's go to the standard crop tool. Here it is. So we don't need that selection. All I want to do is I'm going to click on top of it, clear the 16:9. So let me escape, click again. And you notice now we have the information is right here. So all I need to do is basically click on this anchor point and enrich the edge of my image. And then I'm happy with it, I press enter, and that's it. So if we look at where we started here, and now we've got this, which I think is a remarkable tool. But that's not the only thing that you can do with this tool. See, let's look at another image. Look at this one that was shot in Lithuania. It's an Orthodox church. And clearly I was shooting here with a Sigma 10 to 20 millimeter, and we've got some disproportion. The roof and the walls tend to curve up to the center, and we need to address that. So we're going to use the other tool, so the perspective crop tool. And instead of using points, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the whole image. So I'm going to, here at the corner, click, drag all the way down, and I'm making a whole selection. And you see we have the grid. And the way it works now, what I want to do is you look at this corner of the building here. It's definitely going towards the right. And you see the grid. Basically, the way the tool works is I need to make sure that the line of the grid are parallel with the wall here, the corner. So to do that, I'm going to go at the top left anchor point, and I'm going to drag it toward the right. And you see I'm inclining those lines in the grid, and until I think I've got a good parallel. What I like to do is I like to move the middle anchor point just to have my line, and I may need to zoom in on this one so you guys can see better. Look at this line here. It's not yet perfect. It's a little bit too tight at the top. It's not really parallel. So I need to move it slightly back to the left. And I think here we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it to get even closer. And I think we're very close. And that's going to give us a good result. So that is for the left side. But now I need to look at the right side. Actually, let me do it a little bit more. Okay, let's look at the right side now. The wall has tended to go to the left, but my lines are either vertical or a tendency to go on the right, so that's not going to work. So what I'm going to do is exactly the same thing. I'm going to use the right top anchor point, and I'm going to drag it to the left until I get a parallel line. And I think I am getting there. Let's look at this line here. As I'm getting closer to it, I can really see how parallel it is. And I think it's pretty good. So what I want to do next is I want to extend this selection to the outside of the image to make sure that I have as much image information as possible. Bear in mind, this is a crop tool, so what I'm going to do is going to cut some part of the image. So I'm going to do this, and now also, if you notice, let me zoom in the center of the image. Look here, that line here seems to align with the wall as well, so it seems that it works pretty well. So zoom out, and I press enter now. And as I'm pressing enter, let me zoom out so you guys can see. It did address the perspective, so now the lines are vertical, but it seems to have stretched it up. And it's interesting because as I was recording this episode in French earlier today, I didn't get that result. I got the opposite. It got stretched down, squished. So it's quite unpredictable how you're going to get the results. But nonetheless, what we're going to do now, we're going to use the crop tool to get rid of the white parts in your image. In the future episode, I will show you how we can, instead of cropping and losing all this space, we can actually recreate the content. So having some of the sky here and having some of the grass here appearing on both sides. Because now, by going back to the standard crop tool, what's going to happen is, look, I'm actually going here and I'm going to try to get as much of the image as I can. And you'll notice that it's actually very squeezed right now, like this, and I'm just, yeah, I think I'm going to leave it like that. So you see, it kind of squished it, and what I want to do now, I want to use the free transform tool, so Command or Control T on the PC, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, not stretching, I want to reduce it. So let's go at the top and let's bring it down a little bit, so it's a little bit more real. And I think this is actually pretty good. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So that's what we got. But you see the problem by doing this, we don't have much information. So in terms of framing, it's really not that great. Here what I would do is I would definitely need to bring less sky to have something more like this. And the result, okay, comparing to the beginning, I had more space in the beginning, and now I don't have much space on either side, but at least I dealt with the perspective. So maybe you want to spend a little bit more time doing your lines perfectly well to make sure that you get a perfect alignment. But we'll see, as I said in another episode, how to make sure that we get a little bit more space by recreating the information in the white part of the canvas. So that's the perspective tool. Leaves us with the two last ones, and it's the slice tool and the slice select tool. And to show you that, what I want to do is I want to use this image. That's a screenshot of my website, my homepage. And you see, the slice tool is actually has nothing to do with photography. It was created for web designer initially, and at the beginning when that was created, websites were not designed the same way as they are today. We rely much more on images for your buttons. Nowadays you can just write a text, put a little bit of script, and you end up giving it a shape of a button. Just like the read more button right here, it's just a text that's been scripted. But in the past you needed to actually have an image. And so that's why the slice tool was created. And I'm not going to go into much detail because I appreciate that you guys might be more photographers than web designer. But I just want to let you know how it works quickly, because it's still remarkable. So what we're going to do here, let's imagine you have your web designer that actually created your template, your website this way. And it says, well, actually you're going to have 7 menu items here, and each time when you're going to click on them, you're going to go to a different page. Well, you can imagine that you use the slice tool here and basically, you know, make a selections like this and release. And you could right click, divide the slice and say, well, actually I want 7 buttons because it's going to be 7 menu items. So here, if I put 7 and I press enter, you notice it just splits the whole area in 7. And then I can just go in the anchor point and just move it to make the button more, well, appear better, so it doesn't split a letter and just do like this, and here like that. Then what you can do is, you notice we have a little icon here. If I double click on this, I can give it a name. So let's call it home. And then for the URL, which is the address, I'm going to put http / and my website address. Press enter, and let's use the other one as well. So if I double click on this one, actually, and call it Google, for example, and the address I'm going to put http google.com and enter. So, and that's basically all I'm going to do here. And what I want to show you, the whole point of using the slice tool as well as the select tool. So the slice select tool basically is, let's imagine you do a slice like this, and then you want to move your selection around. Well, in that case, you would just take the slice select tool and you can move your selection around. So I'm just going to reposition it like this, using the arrow key to go nicely. And really the power comes now when you actually go to the file menu and you export it and do save for web. And when you do this, you have this window opening, and we'll talk more about this window in another episode because it's very useful, especially if you want to export your images on your own website, or at least for the web, and you want to resize them but still keep the good quality. So it's a really good window to use. And here I just do save. It just doesn't matter the other options. On my desktop, I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it slice test, and I'm going to give it a name right here. I'm going to call it slice. And you notice I actually talk about HTML now, so that's why it's interesting. And it's because I chose the format HTML and images. And the settings, I leave the default, and the slice says I just leave them all. And I press save. Now if we actually go to my desktop, let me just reduce that. If I go to my desktop now, you'll notice that we have a folder, slice test, and inside we have a folder, images. And in there, you notice that it's basically every single slice that we made and other slices that I made automatically. And it's basically a JPEG each time. And then we have the slice HTML file. If I double click this, let me just drag the window here and zoom out. You notice that the file is really on my desktop. But what you see is it actually really looks like a website. And the thing is, now look what happened when my cursor goes over the home. It looks like it's actually a real website. So I can actually do right click, open in a new tab, and look what happens. It opens my website in a new tab. So it actually created a link behind that particular location. Same with portrait. If I just click on portrait, now I've got the Google page appearing, because that's where I said this image was going to point us to. You notice some white lines here. That's to do with how the automatic slices have been created. Usually you would spend more time and create your slices properly. So that's basically what the slice tool is. It's really for web designing. Whether today is still used, I don't know how much it's used today. People are still using, web designers are still using Photoshop to create templates for their websites. But when it comes to make a demo, a quick demo based on the template, they might not necessarily use Photoshop in this approach here, because there are better tools for it. I'm thinking of like Fireworks and all the tools that from Adobe and from other companies that actually enable you to do web design much quicker. But here is what you find under the crop tool in Photoshop. I just hope that you found all this information useful, that you discovered something, and let me know in the comment if you like it. Don't forget to give me a thumb if you like this video, and you can go for all the keyboard shortcuts that I've discussed here. You can go on the blog article that comes with this video. The link is in the description. You can leave a comment there. You can ask a question. It's always appreciated. So until then, this is Migot saying, if you like it, well, capture it and have fun in Photoshop. Ciao.